The second day of the trial began with more accusations. Park sat quietly as speaker after speaker rose to condemn humanity's actions. The hegemony representative spoke of wounded pride and disrespected authority. The trade syndicate complained about disrupted commerce routes. Even species that had never directly interacted with humans joined the chorus of disapproval. Park watched it all with the patience of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. His delegation grew increasingly frustrated as the morning wore on, but Park remained calm. He had learned long ago that the best time to deliver a killing blow was when the enemy felt most confident of victory. The turning point came when Inquisitor Zelkar took the floor again. The mantis-like creature had clearly appointed himself as humanity's chief prosecutor, and his religious fervor made him careless with his words. "The evidence of human aggression is overwhelming," Zelkar declared, "but this council must look deeper than surface actions. We must examine the underlying threat that this species represents to galactic order." He activated a new holographic display that showed human military formations and colony layouts. But these were not the images from yesterday. These pictures showed something much more recent and specific. 3 years ago, the Council authorized a reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on human capabilities. Zelkar continued. The Kethmaran Empire, working under Council oversight, conducted surveillance of human territory to assess the extent of their military expansion. Park felt his pulse quicken. This was the opening he had been waiting for. The mission revealed disturbing information about human defensive capabilities and expansion plans, the Inquisitor went on. But more importantly, it demonstrated the violent nature of human responses to legitimate galactic authority. New images appeared in the hologram. Park recognized them immediately. Scenes from the Kepler 4i42 system, showing Kethmaran ships approaching human installations. But the images were edited, showing only the human response and not what had provoked it. When confronted with proper Council oversight, the humans responded with immediate violence, Zelkar declared. They attacked Council-authorized vessels without warning or negotiation. This proves that they cannot be trusted to coexist peacefully with civilized species. The chamber murmured with approval. Several Council representatives nodded as if this confirmed their worst suspicions about humanity. Park saw Morden lean forward with satisfaction, clearly believing that this evidence sealed humanity's fate. Dr. Hahn half rose from his seat, his face flushed with anger. "That is not what happened at Kepler 442. The defendant will remain silent," Morden commanded, but Park was already standing. He had heard enough. The moment had come to reveal exactly what kind of species the Council was dealing with. "You attacked our home," he said quietly. The simple words cut through the chamber's noise like a blade. Conversation stopped. The alien representatives turned to look at him with expressions ranging from confusion to indignation. Chancellor Morden's energy form pulsed with annoyance. "General Park, you will address this council with proper respect. Your accusations are both inappropriate and false." Park took a step forward, his voice growing stronger. 3 years ago, Kethmaran raiders entered the Kepler 442 system under what you call Council authorization. They were not conducting reconnaissance. They were testing our defenses to see how easily we could be conquered. "These are wild accusations," Zelkar protested. The Kethmaran were gathering legitimate intelligence under proper Council oversight. Were they gathering intelligence when they destroyed the civilian transport Hope's Dream? Park's voice echoed through the chamber. "Were they conducting reconnaissance when they killed 300 colonists, including 89 children?" A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Several Council representatives exchanged uncertain glances. Park had their attention now, and he intended to use it. Commander Yoon activated her portable holographic projector. New images filled the chamber. Real footage from the Kepler 442 incident, unedited and complete. The assembled aliens watched as Kethmaran raiders attacked civilian targets, destroyed evacuation ships, and hunted down families trying to escape. "This is your Council-authorized reconnaissance," Park continued. Children burned alive in their school dome. Families suffocated in the vacuum after their habitat was breached. Medical personnel murdered while trying to evacuate the wounded. The images were horrific. Park had seen them many times, but they still made his stomach clench with rage. The Kethmaran had not been content with destroying infrastructure. They had deliberately targeted non-combatants, turning a military operation into a massacre. The Hope's dream was a medical transport carrying wounded civilians to safety. Dr. Hahn added, his voice shaking with emotion. The Kethmoran disabled it and then executed the survivors. We have their communications records laughing about it. More footage played. The chamber watched Kethmoran warriors boarding the crippled transport and systematically killing everyone inside. The aliens had recorded their own atrocities, apparently proud of their efficiency. This is impossible, protested the Vorkesh representative. The Council does not authorize attacks on non-combatants, doesn't it? Park turned to face the aquatic alien directly. Or do you simply not care what happens to species you consider inferior? He gestured to Yoon again. New files appeared in the hologram, classified Council documents that human intelligence had obtained through years of careful work. The assembled representatives stared at their own secret communications in stunned silence. Council Directive 447C, Park read aloud. Quote, reconnaissance missions against primitive species may include limited defensive actions to test military capabilities. Collateral damage to civilian targets is acceptable if it serves the greater goal of galactic stability. End quote. The chamber erupted in chaos. Several species began shouting at once, demanding to know how humans had obtained classified documents. Others were protesting that they had never seen such directives before. Park's voice cut through the noise. Directive 891B, quote, newer council members and protected species should not be informed of containment protocols until they demonstrate full loyalty to council authority. End quote. More documents appeared, communications between senior council members discussing how to keep younger species subordinate, plans for managing colonial expansion, and records of similar incidents with other civilizations. The evidence painted a picture of systematic oppression disguised as benevolent guidance. The HFY reduction protocol, Park continued relentlessly. The Dendari limitation agreements. The Altarian exclusion zones. How many species have you crushed in the name of galactic peace? Some council members were frantically trying to access their own records, apparently unaware of the full extent of their leadership's activities. Others sat in stunned silence as decades of hidden policies were exposed. Inquisitor Zelkar recovered first. Even if these documents are authentic, they do not excuse human aggression. The deaths at Kepler 442 were regrettable but necessary for galactic security. Park turned to face the mantis-like creature directly. Necessary? Those children were necessary? Tell me, Inquisitor, how does murdering a 6-year-old girl serve galactic security? The greater good sometimes requires difficult sacrifices, Zelkar replied, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Whose greater good? Park demanded. The greater good of the council members who profit from keeping other species weak? The greater good of the Kethmoran who get to raid and pillage under official protection? He gestured to the holographic displays showing the massacre footage. Or perhaps it serves the greater good of the 89 human children who died screaming in the vacuum of space. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the energy beings seemed to dim as they processed what they were seeing and hearing. Park could see uncertainty spreading through the assembled representatives like a virus. Chancellor Morden attempted to regain control. These allegations, even if true, do not justify humanity's subsequent militarization. Your response has been disproportionate to any perceived threat. Park smiled grimly. It was time to deliver the final blow. Our response? Chancellor, you haven't seen our response yet. What you call militarization is nothing more than basic defensive preparations. We learned an important lesson at Kepler 442. He paused, letting the silence stretch until every alien in the chamber was hanging on his next words. We learned that the Galaxy Council's protection is worthless. We learned that the only security for our children comes from our own strength. And we learned that there are predators in this galaxy who hide behind noble words while feeding on the weak. Park's voice grew harder. So yes, we built defensive stations. Yes, we expanded our military. Yes, we formed alliances with other species who refuse to bow down to your authority. Because the alternative is to watch our children burn, while you call it the greater good. The general looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of every representative who would look at him. You want to know why humans are different from every other species that has joined your council? Because we would rather fight and die than live as your subjects. Because we believe our children's lives are worth more than your galactic order. And because we have seen what happens to species that trust you for protection. The silence in the council chamber stretched for long minutes after Park's revelation. The holographic displays still showed the evidence of the Kepler 442 massacre, casting their terrible light across the faces of alien representatives who were finally beginning to understand what they were truly dealing with. Chancellor Morden was the first to recover. His energy form pulsed with what Park assumed was anger, and his voice carried a dangerous edge when he spoke. General Park, these accusations are extremely serious. Even if we accept the authenticity of these documents, they do not change the fundamental issue before this council. Humanity's response to past events has been aggressive and destabilizing. Park remained standing in the center of the chamber. He could feel the weight of 12 civilizations bearing down on him, but he had faced worse odds during the colony wars. Destabilizing to whom, Chancellor? To the species that profit from keeping others weak? To galactic peace itself, Morden replied. Your militarization threatens the order that has prevented large-scale warfare for over 1,000 years. Your order, Park corrected, built on the graves of species that trusted you to protect them. Dr. Han stood up beside Park, his datapad in hand. If this council truly cares about galactic peace, perhaps you should examine your own role in creating conflict. Our research shows a pattern going back centuries. He activated his own presentation. New holographic displays filled the chamber, showing historical data that made several council representatives shift uncomfortably. The Zerian pacification campaign, 800 years ago, Han began. The Valdris containment protocol 600 years ago. The Kalani reduction 400 years ago. In each case, the Council authorized reconnaissance missions that resulted in the subjugation or destruction of independent species. The evidence was damning. Han had compiled records of dozens of civilizations that had been crushed under the Council's rule. Some had been absorbed as subordinate members, others had simply vanished from galactic politics entirely. The pattern is always the same, Han continued. First, the Council identifies a species with valuable resources or strategic territory. Then they offer protection and guidance. When the species refuses or proves troublesome, they authorize enforcement actions. The Kethmoran and other client species carry out the actual violence while the Council maintains plausible deniability. Advocate Sil then rose from his platform, his gray face flushed with anger. These are historical necessities. The species in question were developing dangerous technologies or expanding too rapidly. The Council had a duty to prevent galactic warfare. By starting wars yourselves? Commander Yoon spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. Her voice was cold and professional, the tone of someone who had studied these conflicts from a military perspective. I have analyzed every one of these pacification campaigns. In each case, the target species was developing military capabilities that might have challenged Council dominance. She gestured to the holographic displays. The Zerians were perfecting faster-than-light communication technology that would have made it impossible for the Council to control information flow. The Valdris had developed defensive shields that could stop Council weapons. The Kalani were forming an alliance of independent species that might have rivaled Council power. These technologies were dangerous, protested the Thalaxian representative, its crystalline form flashing with agitation. Uncontrolled development leads to chaos. Uncontrolled by whom? Park demanded. Dangerous to whom? You claim to prevent warfare, but you have started more conflicts than any other force in galactic history. The chamber erupted in argument as species began taking sides. Some of the older council members defended their historical actions, while newer members demanded explanations for policies they had never been told about. The careful unity that had marked the trial's beginning was cracking apart under the weight of revealed truths. Park watched the chaos with satisfaction. This was exactly what he had hoped to achieve, not just defending humanity's actions, but exposing the fundamental corruption at the heart of galactic politics. Inquisitor Zelkar raised his voice above the din. Even if past actions were imperfect, they do not justify humanity's current threat to galactic stability. Your species shows the same dangerous independence that led to these historical conflicts. You are absolutely right, Park said quietly. His calm tone cut through the shouting, and the chamber gradually fell silent again. Humanity does represent a threat to galactic stability, but not the kind of stability you mean. He walked closer to the council platforms, his gaze moving from one representative to another. We threaten your ability to crush species that refuse to submit. We threaten your monopoly on military power. We threaten your control over galactic politics. Most of all, we threaten the lie that your authority is legitimate." Park gestured toward the evidence still displayed in the chamber's center. "For 1,000 years, you have maintained order through fear and deception. You convinced younger species that they needed your protection, then used that protection as a leash to control them. You created client species like the Kethmaran to do your dirty work while keeping your own hands clean. But humanity changed that equation," Dr. Han added. "We proved that a determined species could fight back successfully. We showed that council protection was not only unnecessary but actively harmful, and we demonstrated that independent species could form their own alliances without council approval." Admiral Kim's voice came through the chamber's communication system. She was still aboard the Taeguk, but Park had given her permission to monitor the proceedings. "General, we are receiving communications from multiple star systems. The Altarian Federation, the Centauri Coalition, and 6 other independent species are requesting immediate defense pacts with humanity." Park smiled grimly. "And there is the real threat we represent, isn't it, Chancellor? Not military conquest, but example. Every species that watches humanity stand up to council authority will start asking why they can't do the same." Morden's energy form pulsed dangerously. "This council will not tolerate rebellion among member species. Order must be maintained." "Whose order?" Park demanded again. "You keep talking about galactic peace and stability, but what you really mean is submission. You want a galaxy where 12 ancient species rule over everyone else, where newer civilizations exist only to serve your interests." He turned to address the entire chamber. "Look around you. Look at how you have structured this very trial. We are surrounded by our accusers, isolated and outnumbered. We are denied access to evidence, denied the right to call witnesses, denied even basic diplomatic courtesies. This is not justice. This is theater designed to reinforce your dominance." The HFY representative spoke for the first time during the trial. Its voice was soft and uncertain, barely audible through the translation system. Is it true that council protection comes with restrictions on our independence?" Several older council members immediately began speaking at once, trying to reassure the farming species that their concerns were groundless. But Park could see doubt spreading through the chamber like cracks in a dam. "Representative HFY," Park said directly, "when was the last time your species made a major decision without council approval? When did you last explore a new star system, or develop a new technology without asking permission first?" The alien's silence was answer enough. Park continued his relentless attack on council legitimacy. "You call us aggressive for building defensive stations, but the HFY have no defenses at all. You call us militaristic for expanding our fleet, but the Dendari are forbidden from having warships larger than patrol boats. You call us dangerous for forming alliances. But how many of your own member species are truly free to choose their own partners?" The questions hung in the air like accusations. Around the chamber, Park could see representatives beginning to look at each other differently. Species that had accepted council authority for centuries were suddenly questioning whether they were members or subjects. Chancellor Morden attempted to regain control. "This council has maintained galactic peace for over a millennium. Our methods may sometimes be harsh, but they have prevented the kind of large-scale warfare that devastated the galaxy in ancient times." "At what cost?" Park shot back. "How many species have paid the price for your peace? How many civilizations have been stunted or destroyed to maintain your vision of order?" He gestured toward the evidence displays one final time. "You want to know why humanity refuses to submit to council authority? Because we have seen what submission means. It means watching our children die while you call it necessary. It means giving up our right to defend ourselves. It means becoming another client species that exists only to serve your interests." Park's voice grew hard as steel. "We did not come to this galaxy seeking conflict. We came seeking our place among the stars. But we will not purchase that place with our freedom. We will not buy your protection with our children's lives, and we will not bow down to authority that has proven itself corrupt and illegitimate." The general looked directly at Chancellor Morden. "You want to maintain galactic order? Then earn the right to lead through J." The council chamber was designed to overwhelm visitors with its sheer size and grandeur. Park and his delegation entered through massive doors that opened with the deep rumble of ancient machinery. Above them, a domed ceiling stretched hundreds of meters high, decorated with holographic displays showing the birth and death of stars. The message was clear. In the face of cosmic forces, individual species were insignificant. 12 platforms surrounded the chamber's central floor, each one designed to accommodate a different type of alien physiology. The Zephyrians appeared as shifting columns of light and energy that made Park's eyes water to look at directly. The Thalaxians were massive crystalline formations that caught and reflected the chamber's illumination in rainbow patterns. The Vorkesh representatives floated in spherical aquatic tanks, their tentacled forms moving in slow, hypnotic patterns. At the highest platform sat Chancellor Morden of the Astral Collective. His form was vaguely humanoid but seemed to be made of compressed starlight. When he spoke, his voice echoed from hidden speakers throughout the chamber, making it impossible to tell where the sound originated. "The Galaxy Council recognizes the human delegation," Morden announced. "You stand accused of violations against galactic peace and stability. How do you answer these charges?" Park remained standing while his delegation took their seats at a small table in the center of the chamber. The positioning was deliberate. They were surrounded by their accusers, isolated and vulnerable. But Park had stood in worse positions during his military career. "We are here to answer questions about human actions in our own territory," he said clearly. "We do not acknowledge the Council's authority to dictate how a sovereign species defends itself." A murmur ran through the chamber. Several alien representatives shifted in what Park assumed was surprise or anger. Apparently, few species had ever challenged the Council's authority so directly. Advocate Sylvan of the Nexus bureaucracy rose from his platform. He was a tall, thin creature with gray skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. His voice carried the practiced smoothness of someone who had prosecuted many such cases. "The defendant's attitude demonstrates exactly why this trial is necessary," Sylvan began. "Humanity shows the same dangerous arrogance that led to the Great Purge Wars 3,000 years ago. They refuse to accept that their actions affect other species. They believe their primitive understanding of galactic politics gives them the right to threaten established order." The prosecutor activated a holographic display that filled the chamber's center. Images appeared showing human colonies, military stations, and patrol routes. To Park's eye, they looked like any reasonable defensive network. But Sylvan presented them as evidence of aggressive expansion. "In the past 10 years, humanity has established military presences in 17 star systems," the advocate continued. "They have built defensive platforms capable of destroying entire fleets. They have refused to submit their expansion plans for Council review. Most disturbing of all, they have begun forming military alliances with other species outside of Council oversight." More images appeared. Human ships working alongside vessels from the Altarian Federation and Centauri Coalition. These were peaceful species that had chosen to remain independent of Council control. But Sylvan made their cooperation with humanity sound like a conspiracy against galactic peace. "The pattern is clear," the prosecutor concluded. "Humanity seeks to create a rival power block that will challenge the Council's authority. They must be stopped before their aggression leads to another galactic war." Diplomat Choi stood to respond. She had prepared carefully for this moment, studying every legal precedent and diplomatic protocol in Council history. "Honored representatives, humanity's actions fall well within the rights of any sovereign species. We have expanded only into unclaimed systems, built defenses only around our own colonies, and formed alliances only with species that freely chose to work with us." Her words were technically correct, but Park could see that the Council was not interested in legal technicalities. They had already decided that humanity was guilty. This trial was just a formality before pronouncing judgment. Inquisitor Zelkar of the Purity Doctrine spoke next. His species resembled giant mantises, and his clicking voice carried religious fervor that made Park's skin crawl. "The human claims of innocence are irrelevant. Their very nature proves their guilt. They are a violent species that glorifies warfare and conquest. Their historical records show thousands of years of constant conflict among themselves." Zelkar's platform projected new images, scenes from human history showing ancient battles, medieval wars, and modern conflicts. The pictures were carefully chosen to make humanity look as savage and bloodthirsty as possible. "A species that cannot live in peace with itself cannot be trusted to live in peace with others," the Inquisitor declared. "The Council has a duty to protect galactic civilization from this threat." Dr. Han stood up angrily. "Those historical conflicts led to our modern philosophy of protecting the innocent and defending the weak. Every species in this chamber has a history of warfare. The difference is that humans learned from our mistakes. Silence. Morden's voice boomed through the chamber. The defendants will speak only when recognized by this council. Park felt his anger rising, but he kept his expression calm. This was exactly what he had expected. A show trial where humanity was condemned regardless of evidence or legal arguments. The council had already decided their fate. The proceedings continued for hours. One after another, council representatives stood to denounce humanity's actions. They spoke of threatened trade routes, destabilized regions, and the danger of allowing primitive species too much freedom. Not once did any of them mention specific laws that had been broken or concrete harm that had been done. Commander Yoon leaned close to Park's ear. "Sir, this is not a trial. It is a sentencing hearing. They intend to make an example of us." Park nodded slightly. He had reached the same conclusion. The council was not interested in justice or even maintaining their own laws. They simply wanted to crush any species that refused to bow down to their authority. As the day wore on, Park noticed something interesting. While the older, more powerful species seemed united in their condemnation of humanity, some of the newer council members appeared less certain. The HFY representative looked uncomfortable whenever speakers mentioned proper submission to authority. The Dendari delegate actually seemed to be taking notes on human defensive strategies, rather than paying attention to the accusations. When the session finally ended, Morden announced that the trial would continue for 3 more days. The defendants will have one opportunity to present their defense tomorrow. After that, this council will render judgment on humanity's crimes against galactic peace. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Choi shook her head in frustration. "I have never seen such a biased proceeding. They are not even pretending to follow their own legal procedures." "Because they do not need to," Han replied. "The council has maintained power for so long that they believe they are above their own laws." "What do we do now?" Choi asked. Park looked back at the council chamber where lights were dimming as the alien representatives departed. Tomorrow he would have his chance to speak. The council expected him to beg for mercy or offer concessions that would reduce humanity to a subordinate status. They were about to learn that humans had a different approach to impossible situations. "Tomorrow, we tell them the truth," Park said quietly. "All of it." That night, Park worked late into the station's artificial night cycle. He reviewed intelligence reports, diplomatic files, and classified records that human operatives had gathered over the past 20 years. Most of the information would be new to the council members. They had grown so comfortable with their power that they no longer bothered to hide their activities from species they considered beneath notice. By morning, Park had assembled a presentation that would either secure humanity's future in the galaxy or start a war that would reshape galactic civilization. Either outcome was preferable to the slow strangulation the council had planned for his species. The truth, as he had learned during his military career, was often the most powerful weapon of all. The journey to Nexus Prime took 12 days through hyperspace. The Teguk traveled alone, as Park had refused the council's offer of an escort. He did not trust alien ships watching his vessel's capabilities, and he wanted to arrive on his own terms. During the voyage, Park spent long hours with his delegation, preparing for what lay ahead. Diplomat Yoonji Choi worked tirelessly, studying every piece of information they had about council procedures and the species they would face. She was a small woman with an intense focus that reminded Park of a laser cutting through metal. "The council follows strict protocols," she explained during one of their planning sessions. "Every species has a specific rank based on when they joined and their technological level. Humans are currently ranked 12th out of 13 member species. Only the HFY rank lower than us." Dr. Sung-Min Han looked up from his data screens. "The HFY have been council members for only 8 years. They are a peaceful farming species that never developed space travel on their own. The council found them and brought them in as a protected civilization, meaning they do whatever the council tells them," added Commander Hye Jin-yoon. She was cleaning her sidearm as she spoke, a habit that always made aliens nervous. "I have read their reports. The HFY have no military, no independent colonies, and no voice in council decisions." Park understood what they were telling him. The council expected humanity to become another HFY, grateful subjects who would follow orders without question. The ranking system was designed to keep newer species in their place while the older Civilizations maintained control. "Tell me about the species, we will." "Face," Park said. Choi activated a holographic display showing the 12 council races. The Zephyrians are energy beings who consider themselves the most evolved species in the galaxy. They rarely involve themselves in physical matters, but their vote carries great weight. The Thalaxians are crystalline entities that think in terms of geological time. They make decisions very slowly, but never change their minds. She moved to the next images. The Vorkesh are aquatic and highly logical. They view conflicts as mathematical problems to be solved. The Astral Collective are the current leaders. They have held the council presidency for the past century. Han added his own analysis. The pattern is clear. All of the ranking species achieved space travel thousands of years before humanity was even farming. They have controlled galactic politics for so long that they cannot imagine any other way. "What about the Kethmoran Empire?" Park asked. The insectoid slavers had been humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, and the memory still burned in his mind. Yoon's expression darkened. "They are not council members, but they have what the council calls observer status. They attend meetings and provide intelligence in exchange for protection. The council claims they are reformed, but they still raid weaker species when they think no one is watching," Park finished. He had seen the reports from human intelligence networks. The Kethmoran had not changed their nature, only learned to be more careful about their targets. As they traveled deeper into council space, the crew began picking up communications from other ships. Most of the traffic was routine trade and transport, but some messages made Park thoughtful. He heard reports of police actions against unruly colonies and protective relocations of entire populations. The council maintained order through fear, just like every empire in human history. On the 8th day, they received a message from Nexus Prime. Park expected instructions about docking procedures or diplomatic protocols. Instead, he found himself looking at a minor council bureaucrat who spoke in the condescending tone reserved for children and primitives. "Human vessel Teguk, you are approaching restricted space. Reduce speed to 1/4 impulse and prepare for inspection. Any attempt to scan council facilities will be considered a hostile act." Park felt his jaw tighten. No other species was treated this way when approaching the council station. He had read the diplomatic reports. Even new applicant civilizations were shown basic respect during their first visits. "Captain Lee, respond to their message," Park ordered. "Tell them that the UES Teguk is responding to an official council summons and will maintain normal approach speed. Inform them that any attempt to board or scan this vessel will be considered a hostile act against a diplomatic mission." The reply came back within minutes, this time from a higher-ranking official whose tone was even more insulting. "Human vessel, you will comply with all council directives immediately. Your primitive understanding of diplomatic law does not grant you special privileges in council space." Admiral Kim appeared at Park's shoulder. "Sir, we are detecting multiple scanner sweeps from the station. They are trying to map our hull configuration and weapon systems. Return the favor," Park said quietly. "I want to know everything about their defensive capabilities." The Teguk's sensors were far more sophisticated than most alien technology. Within minutes, the ship's computers had analyzed Nexus Prime's entire defensive grid. Park studied the readouts with professional interest. The station was heavily armed but designed to intimidate rather than fight. Its weapons were older models that relied more on reputation than effectiveness. "They are not expecting a real fight," Yoon observed. "This is a fortress built to scare primitive species into submission." As they drew closer to Nexus Prime, Park could see why the Council had chosen this location for their seat of power. The massive station orbited a neutron star, surrounded by the twisted remains of dead worlds. It was a monument to cosmic forces beyond any single species' control, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations were small compared to the universe itself. But Park saw something else in the display. The neutron star's gravity well would make escape difficult for any ship that did not have precise navigation data. Any species that challenged the Council here would be fighting at a severe disadvantage, trapped in orbit around a stellar grave. The docking procedure was deliberately humiliating. Instead of being assigned to the diplomatic berths used by important visitors, the Teguk was directed to a maintenance section normally reserved for cargo haulers and waste disposal ships. The docking clamps that seized the ship were older models that locked with excessive force. making the entire hull ring like a struck bell. They want us to feel small, Choi observed as they prepared to disembark. Then they do not know humans very well, Park replied. He had fought in battles where humanity was outnumbered 100 to 1. He had seen human colonies survive attacks that should have destroyed them completely. A few alien mind games would not break his resolve. The welcoming committee that met them at the airlock consisted of junior bureaucrats and security guards. No high-ranking officials, no formal ceremony, no acknowledgement that they were dealing with representatives of a sovereign civilization. Park noted every slight, every calculated insult, every attempt to make them feel unwelcome. "General Park," said the lead bureaucrat, a spider-like creature whose translation device made its voice sound bored. "You are assigned to quarters in Section 7, Level 12. Your trial begins in 3 days. Until then, you are confined to your assigned areas. We request access to council records relevant to our case," Choi said formally. "Denied. Primitive species do not have clearance for such materials. We request a meeting with neutral observers from non-council species." Denied. "This is an internal council matter. We request communication access to human territory. Limited communication will be permitted. All messages will be monitored for security purposes." Park listened to the exchange without changing expression. Every request was denied, every courtesy refused. The council was making it clear that humanity had no rights here, no friends, and no hope of fair treatment. As they were escorted through the station's corridors, Park observed everything. The layout of security checkpoints, the positions of weapon emplacements, the routes that led to critical systems. If this situation turned violent, he wanted to know exactly how to hurt the station where it mattered most. Their quarters were small, poorly furnished and clearly designed to make them feel like prisoners rather than guests. But Park had slept in worse places during wartime. Comfort was not important now. What mattered was showing the galaxy that humanity could not be intimidated by cheap tricks and petty humiliations. That night, as his team prepared for the coming trial, Park stood at the small viewport in his quarters and looked out at the neutron star. Its radiation made the surrounding space shimmer with deadly beauty. Tomorrow he would face the combined might of 12 alien civilizations, all of them convinced that humanity needed to be taught a lesson. They had no idea what kind of lesson they were about to receive in return. General Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the UES Taeguk, watching the stars through the massive viewing screen. The ship was humanity's pride, a dreadnought that had seen 3 major battles and never lost one. Park had commanded it for 5 years, and in that time, he had learned to read the mood of space itself. Today something felt wrong. "General, we have an incoming transmission," said Captain Ji-Ho Lee from his station. The young officer's voice carried tension that made Park turn around. "It's from the Galaxy Council, sir." "Priority 1, Park nodded slowly. The Galaxy Council never sent Priority 1 messages unless something serious was happening. He had only received 2 such messages in his entire career. Both times had meant trouble for humanity. "Put it through, Captain." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Park was looking at Ambassador Vextar of the Hegemony. The reptilian creature's scales gleamed under artificial light, and his yellow eyes held the same cold arrogance that Park remembered from their last meeting. Vextar spoke in the clicking, harsh language of his people, but the translation came through clearly. "General Park of the Human Military Forces, by order of the Galaxy Council, humanity is summoned to appear before the tribunal on Nexus Prime. You are charged with excessive military expansion and violation of established territorial protocols." Park kept his face calm, but inside he felt anger rising. He had expected this day would come. The other species in the galaxy had been watching humanity too closely lately, asking too many questions about their ships and colonies. "The charges are serious," Vextar continued. "Your species has expanded into 17 star systems in the past 10 years. You have built military stations without council approval. You have refused to submit your expansion plans for review. These actions threaten galactic peace." The ambassador paused, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. Even through the transmission, Park could sense the creature's satisfaction. "You will appear before the council in 30 standard days. Failure to comply will result in sanctions against all human territories." The transmission ended abruptly. Park stared at the blank screen for several moments before turning to his crew. Every officer on the bridge was looking at him, waiting for orders. "Captain Lee," Send a message to Admiral Kim. Tell her I need to see her immediately. Park moved to his command chair and sat down heavily. Also contact Earth Command. Inform them that the Galaxy Council has finally made their move. Admiral So-Young Kim arrived within the hour. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that could calculate battle odds faster than most computers. Park had served with her for 15 years, and he trusted her judgment more than anyone else in the fleet. So they finally did it, she said, as she entered Park's private office behind the bridge. I was wondering when they would get tired of watching us grow stronger. Park poured 2 cups of coffee. Real coffee from Earth, not the synthetic stuff most ships used. What do you think our chances are if this goes badly? Kim sat down and considered the question. In a straight fight, we could hold our own against any single council species. But all 12 of them together? She shook her head. We would lose eventually. They have more ships, more experience, and they control most of the galaxy's trade routes. But, Park could hear something else in her voice, but they have never fought anything like us before. Kim smiled grimly. Every other species that joined the galaxy did so peacefully. They followed the rules, asked permission, and accepted whatever the council decided. We are different, Park knew she was right. Humanity had not asked to join the galactic community. They had been found by the Kethmoran Empire 20 years ago, when the insectoid raiders had tried to attack Earth's outer colonies. The battle had been brutal, but humans had fought back with a ferocity that surprised everyone. Instead of surrendering when outnumbered, they had kept fighting. Instead of accepting defeat, they had built bigger ships and better weapons. The council expected us to be grateful, Park said. They thought we would bow down and follow their rules like everyone else. Instead, we built the Tiguk. Kim gestured around them. The ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, faster than most council vessels with weapons that could punch through any known armor. And 17 colonies that can defend themselves. A knock on the door interrupted them. Captain Lee entered with a data pad in his hands. General, we have received responses from Earth Command and the Colonial Defense Force. They are both asking the same question. Do we comply with the summons? Park took the data pad and read through the messages. President Chang wanted to avoid conflict if possible. The colonial governors were demanding that Earth stand firm. The military commanders were split between caution and defiance. What do you recommend, Captain? Park asked. Lee straightened his shoulders. Sir, I think we should go, but not to apologize or beg for mercy. We should go to show them who we really are. Kim nodded approvingly. The boy has a point. If we refuse the summons, they will say we are criminals hiding from justice. If we go and grovel, they will treat us like slaves forever. But if we go and stand our ground, we show them that humanity will not be pushed around. Park made his decision. Captain, send word to Earth Command. Tell them we will attend the tribunal, but we go on our own terms. Over the next few days, Park assembled his team for the journey to Nexus Prime. He chose people carefully, each one representing a different aspect of humanity's strength. Diplomat Yoonji Choi would handle the formal proceedings. She was brilliant at understanding alien psychology and finding ways to communicate across species barriers. Dr. Sung Min Han would provide historical and strategic analysis. His knowledge of galactic politics was unmatched. Commander Hyejin Yoon would handle security. She was the best special forces officer in the human military. As the Tiguk prepared to depart for the council station, Park stood once again on the bridge looking at the stars. But now he saw them differently. Each point of light might contain enemies who wanted to see humanity brought low, or allies who were waiting for someone to stand up to the council's arrogance. Sir, we are ready to jump to hyperspace, reported the navigation officer. Park settled into his command chair. Take us to Nexus Prime, Lieutenant. It is time to remind the galaxy that humanity did not come this far just to surrender now. The stars stretched into lines of light as the Tiguk jumped toward whatever waited at the council station. Park knew that the next few weeks would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. They would either emerge as an equal member of the galactic community, or they would face a war unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Either way, humanity would not go quietly.